She slid the folder across the kitchen table and rested her palm flat on top of it, the way some people rest a hand on a Bible. Sign it. Somebody has to be the reasonable one. 9 years I had taken care of our grandmother in that house. 4 doses a day. Every night. Every holiday. I was never paid $1. Here is what my sister did not know. I had already seen. 3 pages deep into that folder was a loan, $62,000. My name was signed at the bottom in a hand that looked exactly like mine. And I had never signed it. I walked out the side door that morning with a duffel bag. $41 and 9 composition notebooks. Today I read handwriting and care logs for a living. I review long-term care claims. I catch people who bill for work. They never did. Last winter, I finally sat down and read the ones my own family filed in my name. 84 of them. And I made every stolen hour cost them to the dollar. In writing, in a room with a court reporter in it. My name is Ada. I am 37 years old. If you have ever been the person everybody calls when it is hard and forgets when it is time to pay, stay with me. I need you to see this the way I finally saw it. The dullest object in that house was about to become the thing that set me free. Let me take you back. One clean jump, and then we go forward together. And I will keep telling you where we are. 9 years and 2 months before the morning, I walked out. Our grandmother had a stroke on her back steps while she was carrying a laundry basket. She was 79. She lived alone on Harlow Street in a narrow brick house with a side door that stuck in humid weather and a back garden. She had let go wild on purpose, because she said tidy gardens were a confession that you had nothing better to do. She came home from the hospital with a walker, a swallowing problem, and a medication schedule so complicated that the discharge nurse printed it twice. In case one copy got wet, somebody had to move in. There were 2 of us. My sister was 34 then. She had a house with a garage, a husband, a 5-year-old boy, and a job as a mortgage loan officer at the credit union on Dunlap Avenue. The kind of job where people call you by your first name at the grocery store because you got them into their first home. I was 28. I was a floater at a dental office, making $11 and change an hour. I rented 1 room in a house with 3 other people. I had no husband, no children, and no reason anyone could name. So the family did the math out loud at the kitchen table, and the math came out the way it always comes out. My sister said it gently, with her hands folded. Ada has the flexibility. That is the sentence. If you have ever been told you have the flexibility, you already know it is not a compliment. It is an invoice. I want to be honest with you, because this only works if I am. I said, yes. Nobody dragged me. I loved that woman. She taught me to drive in a church parking lot, and she never once raised her voice at me in my whole life, which is more than I can say for anyone else in my family. I gave up my room. I gave up the dental office because the shifts stopped lining up with her appointments. I moved into the back bedroom on Harlow Street with 2 suitcases and a lamp. And on my second night there, my grandmother did something I did not understand. For 9 more years, she took the spare house key off her ring. She tied it to a red shoelace because she said I would lose it otherwise. And I would, and she knew it. She put it in my hand and closed my fingers over it and said, now, you can always let yourself in. That was the ordinary meaning. Remember it. It comes back. There was one more thing in that room that night, and you would not have looked at it twice. On the dresser, still in its plastic wrap, was a 3-pack of composition notebooks, black and white, marbled covers, 99 cents each. The discharge nurse had told me to write down every dose, every time, every reaction. In case of a hospital readmission, I wrote the first entry that night, 6:40 p.m. 2 tablets. Water. No. Difficulty. I would write that entry, or one like it, roughly 13,000 more times. Stay with me. This is where it changes. 8 months after I moved in, I asked about money once. I want you to understand how small the question was. I was not asking for a salary. The pharmacy had started calling me instead of her, and the woman at the counter mentioned, in the offhand way people mention things that change your life, that a lot of her customers had policies that paid something to whoever was doing the day-to-day care. I did not know what that meant. I said so. She explained it in the parking lot, holding a bag of blood thinner samples. Long-term care insurance, a policy you buy while you are healthy, so that if you ever cannot dress yourself or feed yourself, it pays out. And some of those policies, she said, do not care whether the hands doing the bathing belong to a home health agency or to your own granddaughter. They pay either way. They just need a form with somebody named on it as the caregiver of record, the person whose hands are actually doing the work. The caregiver of record. I drove home, saying it out loud, so I would not lose it. That night, I asked my sister. She had power of attorney. She had gotten it 3 weeks after the stroke, at the hospital, with a clipboard, and she had explained it to all of us as a filing convenience. Her exact words. It just keeps the paperwork in one place, so Ada doesn't have to deal with any of it. She did not laugh at me. She never laughed at me. That is the part people get wrong about her. She poured me a glass of wine I had not asked for, sat down across from me at that kitchen table, and looked genuinely sorry. There is a policy, she said, but it doesn't cover family. It only pays a licensed agency. Believe me, I looked. I looked the first week, and then she said the sentence. The first time I heard it, somebody has to be the reasonable one. Ada, I felt embarrassed. That is the truth. I felt like I had asked my grandmother's dying body for a receipt. I apologized. I actually apologized to her, in that kitchen, for asking. I did not check. There was nothing to check with. I did not know the insurance company's name. I was 29 years old, and I had never in my life read a document longer than a lease. That policy did cover family. It had covered family from the day my grandmother bought it. And 11 weeks before that conversation in the kitchen, a form had already been filed naming a caregiver of record, and the name on it was mine. 2 years and 4 months before the morning I walked out. My sister brought a stranger to the house. It was a Tuesday. Late afternoon. Tuesday was the day I changed the bed linens, and I was standing in the hallway with an armful of sheets when the side door stuck and then gave, the way it always did, and my sister came in with a woman I had never seen. The woman was maybe 60. She had a canvas tote bag, reading glasses on a chain, and the tired, pleasant face of somebody who does the same 20 minutes over and over in strangers' living rooms. My sister introduced her as the notary. A notary? And I am going to explain this the way I wish somebody had explained it to me, because it is the whole story. A notary is a person the state licenses to sit across from you. Look at your face. Look at your driver's license. Watch your hand move and then press a little inked seal onto the page. That seal is not about the document. It is about you. It is the state saying, this person was really in the room, and this signature is really hers. That seal is the entire reason. A piece of paper can take a house away from you. They had come about the roof. The back roof had been failing for a decade. There was a stain on my grandmother's bedroom ceiling, shaped like the state of Ohio. My sister needed a home equity line, money borrowed against the value of the house, to pay for it. And she explained, patiently, That because I lived there, because my name was on the utility bills, the lender wanted a one-page acknowledgement from me, just confirming that I lived at the address and had no ownership claim. That is a real form. That is a completely normal form. I have read hundreds of them since. I put down the sheets. I sat at the kitchen table. The notary asked for my driver's license. She wrote my license number in a small bound book she kept in the tote bag. And she asked me to sign her book, too, next to the entry. Then she asked me to sign the form. I signed it. Once, in blue ink, at 3:15 in the afternoon, in front of a witness, of my own free will, fully informed, exactly the way the law is supposed to work. It is the only signature in this entire story that is actually mine. And I have thought about that afternoon more than I have thought about almost any other afternoon of my life. Because when you sign one document in front of a notary who keeps a bound book, you have created a perfect, dated, legally certified specimen of your own handwriting. A model. A template. You have shown somebody exactly what your name looks like. When you mean it. The roof was fixed that fall. It was a good roof. I want to be fair. The money went into the roof. The second loan, the one for $62,000, came 14 months later. I was not at that table. There was no notary in that kitchen that day. There was a stamp on that page anyway. Hold on to that. It is going to matter more than anything else. I tell you, 3 years and 1 month before the morning I walked out, we had Christmas at my sister's house. We always had Christmas at my sister's house because it had the good lighting and a dining room that could seat 11. And because my grandmother's house had me in it, and me in it was not festive, I got her dressed that morning. That took an hour and 10 minutes. The good blouse with the covered buttons, because she could not manage buttons anymore and would not wear anything that made that obvious. Compression, stockings, the wig she wore after the radiation, which she called the hat, and which she would not let anyone touch but me. We arrived at 1:15 p.m. I carried her purse, her folding walker, a casserole dish, and her afternoon doses in a pill organizer in my coat pocket. Nobody offered to take anything from my hands. After the meal, my sister stood up at the head of her own table and tapped a fork against a water glass. And she looked at me with what I can only describe as real, warm, entirely sincere love. She said, "We all know what Ada does for this family." And she handed me a card. Inside the card, in cash, were thready $100 bills. Everybody applauded. Do you understand what happened in that room? It took me years, and I lived it. $300, handed across a dining table in front of 9 people, was not a gift. It was a receipt. It was my sister paying the debt in public, in a currency that could not be traced, in an amount that made everyone feel the matter had now been handled and did not need to be raised again. That same month, the insurance company sent $1,400 to an account I had never seen. It had sent $1,400 the month before, and it would send it the month after. I sat in my sister's guest bathroom for 4 minutes, with the water running so nobody would hear anything. Then I came out, and I cleared plates. If you have ever had your worth handed to you in cash in front of a room, so that nobody had to say thank you where it counted, I want to hear from you. Comment the word envelope below. Just that one word. I read them. I read all of them, and I know exactly what that word costs to type. There was one person at that table who did the thing nobody else did. My nephew was 7. That Christmas, he came and found me in the kitchen while I was rinsing dishes, and he handed me a drawing he had made at school of a house with a red line coming out of the door. I asked him what the red line was. He said, "It is your string, so you can get in." He had seen the key on the red shoelace, hanging by my grandmother's back door. He was 7 years old, and out of every person who ate at that table, he was the only one who had noticed that I was the one who let myself in. Keep him in mind. He is the only person in this story I still speak to. 14 months before the morning I walked out, my grandmother had her second stroke. This one took her speech and most of her right side. She could not be left alone anymore. Not for an hour. Not for 20 minutes. I stopped sleeping in a way people who have not done it cannot picture. I was tired. For 400 and some nights, I slept in 90-minute pieces on a mattress on the floor beside her bed because she could no longer press a call button, and the only warning I got was a change in her breathing. I learned that breathing, I could wake out of a dead sleep from a change in it. I still can. I hear it in hotel rooms. The notebooks got fuller. 6, 7, 8 entries a day, doses, refusals, a rash on the inside of her left elbow. The date the hospice nurse first used the word comfort. They were the most boring objects in that house. 99 cents. Marbled cardboard. My handwriting is not beautiful. It is fast and it slants. And by year 7, it had become the handwriting of a person taking notes in the dark, because half of it was taken in the dark. They were a chore. That is all they were to me. And I kept every one in a cardboard box in the back bedroom closet, and I never once opened an old one. Now, 4 weeks after that second stroke, on a Thursday, my sister came to the house at 10 in the morning with a folder and asked me to run an errand. The pharmacy on Dunlap Avenue had gotten a shipment in. She said they would not release it to her. She said they needed me, the caregiver, in person. I remember being glad that somebody was staying with my grandmother so I could be outdoors, alone, in a car, for 20 minutes. That is what I remember feeling. Gladness. The pharmacy had no shipment. The woman at the counter checked twice, apologized, and offered to call if something came in. I was gone for 24 minutes. I have gone back over those 24 minutes more times than I can count. Here is what I know now, because I have the timestamps. Because everything in this world is written down somewhere, if you know which office to ask. At 10:17 that morning, while I was standing in a pharmacy being politely told that nothing had arrived, a home equity loan for $62,000, secured against the house on Harlow Street, was signed in the name of Ada and stamped with a notary seal. There was no notary in that kitchen. The stamp was real. The stamp belonged to the same woman with the canvas tote bag and the reading glasses and the little bound book. And when I finally saw that page, 4 years later, in a folder on my own kitchen table, the thing I noticed first was not my forged signature. It was the date on the stamp. My grandmother died in the back bedroom of the house on Harlow Street at 4:50 in the morning, 6 weeks before I walked out of it. I was awake. I was holding her left hand, the side that still worked. Nobody else was in the house. Embesammed. I called my sister at 4:58. She arrived at 6:20. The funeral was on a Saturday. My sister spoke. She spoke beautifully. She said our grandmother had taught her that family shows up. 11 people came up to me afterward in the church basement with coffee and paper cups, and each of them said some version of the same sentence. She was lucky to have you, I said. Thank you, 11 times. I did not say, I have not slept a full night in 14 months. I did not say, I am 33, and I have no job, no savings, no apartment, no health insurance, and no idea what happens to me on Monday. I did not say, I have not been paid. I stated no facts at all. I said thank you. That is the part I would change. If I could change one thing, not the forged loan, not the money, that, the 11, thank, yes. The will was read the following Thursday in a lawyer's office with a view of a parking structure. The house went to my sister. Everything went to my sister. I was not angry. You may not believe that, but I was not. I had never expected the house. I had lived there. I had not owned it. I understood the difference. My sister squeezed my hand in the elevator afterward and said she would take care of me. She said we would sit down and figure out what was fair. She said, "Come by tomorrow morning. I'll make coffee. I want you to notice something." And then we go to the morning that everything turned on. She did not have to invite me to that house. I had a key. I had had a key for 9 years, on a red shoelace, hanging by the back door. She invited me because she needed me to arrive at a specific time, at a table she had already set. This is the 0 point. Everything I have told you so far has been walking toward this morning. Everything after it walks away from it. 7:40 in the morning, the kitchen on Harlow Street. 6 weeks after the funeral, 1 week after the will. My sister was already there when I came down the stairs. She had made coffee in my grandmother's percolator, the old aluminum one, and she had made it wrong, too strong, and left standing too long, so the whole kitchen smelled scorched. She had a folder in front of her, manila, maybe half an inch thick. She was wearing what she wore to work. She had a 9:30 appointment at the credit union. She told me that twice, which is how I know she had planned exactly how long this was going to take. She poured me a cup I did not want and started talking about closure. She said the estate was complicated. She said there were debts against the house I did not know about, and that she was carrying all of it. She said her lawyer had drawn up a family settlement agreement, 1 page, in which I acknowledged that I had no claim against the estate, no claim for services rendered, no claim of any kind, past or future. She said, if I signed it, we could be sisters again instead of parties. Parties. She used that word. She is alone, officer. Words like that live in her mouth. She slid the folder across the table and put her palm flat on top of it. Sign it. Somebody has to be the reasonable one. I did not reach for the folder. I want to be clear about that. I never reached for it. She got up to answer her phone and stepped into the front hall, using the tone she uses with clients. I sat at the table with my hands in my lap, and the folder was open. It was open because she had opened it. Page 1 was the settlement agreement. 1 page, exactly as she said, but she had let it fall further than she meant to, and the pages had fanned, the way pages do, and I could see the corner of something underneath. I did not touch it. I turned my head. That was all it took. That was the whole crime, visible from a seated position, with my hands in my lap, a home equity line of credit, drawn against the house on Harlow Street. The figure was printed in a box on the right side of the page. $62,000. And at the bottom, on the borrower line, was my name, in my handwriting, or in something that had been taught to be my handwriting. I want to tell you that I felt rage. I did not. I felt nothing at all, which I have since learned is what a body does when the floor goes. What I felt was a small, stupid, administrative confusion. I remember thinking, very clearly, I do not remember signing that. And 1 second later, because I didn't, she came back into the kitchen at 7:52. She looked at the folder. She looked at me, and her face did something I will remember for the rest of my life. It did not do fear. It did not do shame. It did impatience. She said, Ada, don't. 2 words. That is the entire confession. Not, what are you looking at? Not, let me explain. Not, that isn't what it looks like. Don't. I too saw. She knew that I knew. She knew I had known for maybe 4 seconds. And her first instinct, her very first instinct, was to manage me, to handle it, to be the reasonable one. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I have never raised my voice at her, and I never will, because that would have given her something to describe to other people afterward. And she is very, very good at describing me to other people. I went upstairs, to the back bedroom. I put 2 changes of clothes and a phone charger into a canvas duffel bag. Then I opened the closet. The cardboard box was on the floor, under a garment bag with my grandmother's church coat in it. 9 composition notebooks. 9 years. 13,000 entries in my own hand, dated, in ink, contemporaneous. Written the same day the thing happened, every single time, because a nurse had told me to 9 years ago. And I did what I was told. I did not take them, because I thought they were evidence. I will not pretend to be smarter than I was. I took them because they were mine, and because they were the only thing in that house that was. I went down the stairs with the duffel over my shoulder and the box against my hip. My sister was standing at the bottom, and she said, "Where are you going to go?" Which, taken apart, is not a question. It is an assessment. It is a loan officer looking at an applicant with no income and no collateral and telling her, kindly, what her file says. I went out the side door. The one that sticks. The spa. I had to put the box down. To pull it open, I had $41 in my checking account. And in my coat pocket, because it had been in my coat pocket for 9 years, was a house key on a red shoelace. I did not give it back. I have never given it back. Stay with me. This is where the story stops being done to me. 4 months after I left Harlow Street, I took a job on the overnight shift at a claims processing center in an office park off the interstate. The work was data entry, long-term care claims, the same kind of policy my grandmother had. Though I did not know that yet. Or rather, I knew it the way you know, the name of a disease before it is yours. The job was this. A claim comes in from a family. Somebody's mother cannot bathe herself anymore. There is a form and a doctor's certification and a care log, and my job was to take what was on the paper and put it in the right field on the screen. 300, 400 times a night, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. for $15.50 an hour. It was the first money of my life paid for my own hours, into an account with my own name on it. I would like to tell you, it felt like freedom. For the first 2 months, it mostly felt like a bus ride. In the dark, I was in a rented room again, with a hot plate, at 33 exactly where I had been at 28, except that I had given 9 years away in between. If you have ever had to start your life over from a floor you had already crawled off of once, you know something that people who have not done it will never learn from a book. My supervisor on that shift was a woman named Odette. She was 61. She had been processing claims for 26 years. She wore reading glasses on a chain, and I want to be honest. The first time I saw those glasses on that chain, my chest went cold because of a notary in a kitchen, and I had to go stand in the parking lot for 2 minutes. Odette did not fix anything for me. She never once offered to. That is why. I could tell her. I told her the whole thing on a break at 3 in the morning, in a room with a vending machine and a table. In the flat, orderly way I am telling you now, because that is the only way I can say it out loud. She did not gasp. She did not say, "Oh, honey." She did not tell me to sue anybody. She stirred her coffee, looked at the table, and said the sentence I have carried every day since. The paperwork doesn't care who cried, Ada. It only cares who wrote it down. And I said, and I remember exactly how small my voice was. I wrote everything down. She looked up. She said, "Then you have already won, and you just haven't done the filing yet." 9 notebooks were in a cardboard box under my bed, in a rented room, and a woman I had known for 4 months had just told me what they were. If you have somebody like that in your life, somebody who listens without trying to fix you, who just tells you the truth and lets you carry it, subscribe and go tell them tonight. Not for me. For them. There are not many of them, and they never know what they did. Here is what the next 3 years looked like. I am going to move fast because you already know I survived. And the survival is not the interesting part. The rented room became half of a duplex. The overnight shift became the evening shift. Then a desk. I passed the entry examination for claims examiner on the second attempt. At 35. Having studied on a bus, I took the certificate program in long-term care claims review. 2 nights a week, 22 months, paid for $400 at a time. I learned what a caregiver of record is. Formally, legally, I learned that a policy pays a monthly benefit to whoever is named on the attestation form. The page that says, in plain language, this person, whose signature is below, is the one actually doing the work. I learned that those forms get filed every single month and carry a signature every single month, and that insurance companies keep them. For a very long time, I learned to read handwriting. Not as an expert. I want to be careful here. I am not a forensic document examiner, and I never claimed to be. But you look at 400 signatures a night for 3 years, and something happens to your eye. You start to see the places where a hand hesitated, where a person lifted the pen and looked at something, and put the pen back down. Forgers lift the pen. Real hands do not. And I learned the boring thing. The thing that is the actual weapon in this entire story. The thing nobody puts in a movie. I learned who to ask, and what form to ask on. I moved into that half-duplex with a mattress, a lamp, and a cardboard box of notebooks. I had still never opened. 3 years, and I never opened them. I told myself it was because the past was the past. It was because I was afraid of my own handwriting. Somewhere in year 2, I bought a small brass keyring and moved my new front door key onto it. And then I stood in my own doorway like an idiot for a full minute because I could not decide what to do with a red shoeless. I kept it in the drawer, coiled up, with nothing on it. Now, 3 years and 8 months after the morning, I walked out of that kitchen. I sat down at my own table and did one thing. I did not investigate my family. I did not use my employer system. I did not run anybody's name in a database. I filled out a request form as a private citizen, and I mailed it. I need you to see this part clean, because if I got this wrong, they win. I work for an insurance company. The policy that had been paying out on my grandmother's care belonged to a different insurance company, Fairbank Mutual, a company I have never worked for, whose systems I have never had access to, and whose files I could not have touched in 100 years from my desk. I could not investigate my sister. I did not try. But here is the thing, my sister never understood, because she thought about paperwork the way most people do, as a wall. Paperwork is not a wall. Paperwork is a door with a rule on it, and the rule is written down, and anyone allowed to walk through it can walk through it, including you. Those attestation forms carried my name. They carried my address. They carried the last 4 digits of my social security number, which meant that, as far as Fairbank Mutual's records were concerned, I was not a stranger asking about somebody else's business. I was the subject of the record. And an insurance company has to give you a copy of the records that are about you, if you ask the right way. In writing, with your identity verified. So on a Saturday morning, at my own kitchen table, I wrote a letter. I asked for a complete copy of every document on file, bearing my name in connection with my grandmother's policy at the address on Harlow Street. I named myself as the subject of the record. I attached a copy of my driver's license. I sent it certified, which means a person has to sign for it, and the signature comes back to you on a green card in the mail. Then, on Monday morning, before I opened a single file at work, I walked into my supervisor's office, and I told her exactly what I had done and exactly what I expected to find, and I put it in an email to her afterward so that there would be a record with a time on it. I recused myself from anything on my desk that touched a Fairbank mutual policy, for as long as this took. She agreed. She put it in writing. I did that because I knew what was coming, and I knew that the very first thing my sister would say, the very first thing, was that I had used my job to come after her. She said it. Anyway, of course, she did. It just did not matter, because I had already made it impossible to be true. The green card came back in 11 days. The folder came back in 5 weeks. It was thicker than the one she had slid across the table. I opened it at my kitchen table at 7:20 in the evening, on a Tuesday, alone. I am going to take you through it the way it came, page by page, because that is the way it came, and because I want you to feel the floor go the way I felt it go. Page 1 was a cover letter from Fairbank Mutual. 2 paragraphs. Polite tone. It said they were pleased to enclose the records I had requested as the named caregiver of record on the policy. Not the caregiver. The caregiver. They had known my name. 4 years. They had been mailing my name to an address for years. They just had never once mailed it to me. Page 2 was the first attestation form. An attestation is a page where a person swears something is true and signs their name under it. This one had 4 lines. The month, the days of care provided, a 1-line description of the care, and a signature over a printed line that said caregiver. The month on that first form was the month my grandmother came home from her first stroke, which was 11 weeks before I sat in her kitchen and asked my sister whether there was any money, and was told no, and apologized for asking. The signature was mine. It was not mine. You can see it when you know what you are looking for. The A leans wrong. My leans back because I am left-handed, and I write pulling. This, a leaned forward, and halfway through my last name, in the middle of a letter, the pen had stopped, and lifted, and started again. That is a person copying. That is a person looking at a model, and then looking back down at the page. Nobody hesitates in the middle of their own last name. You have written your own last name 10,000 times in your life. Your hand does it while you think about something else. That is what I do for a living. Now, that is what I look for, and I found it on the first page of the first form, in a signature that was pretending to be me. There were 84 of them. 84 forms. 84 months. One for every month, from the first stroke to the week. My grandmother died. Take a breath here. I am going to give you the number, and then I am going to tell you what it actually is, because I do not want you doing arithmetic in your head while I talk. The benefit was $1,400 a month. It was paid for 84 months. $117,600. That is not a bill. That is not a sum of money. That is a down payment on a house. That is more than I have earned in my entire working life. All of it. Every job. Added together. That is 7 years of somebody else's mortgage, paid for with my back and my hands, and 400 nights of 90-minute sleep, and every one of those payments went into a checking account at the credit union on Dunlap Avenue. Page 88, near the back, was the direct deposit authorization, account number, routing number, signed by the caregiver of record, signed by me. I have never in my life held an account at that credit union, and then 4 pages further into that same folder. Everything I needed had been sitting in one envelope the entire time. Was the copy Fairbank Mutual kept of the home equity loan, the one drawn against the house. They had it because a loan against a policyholder's home has to be disclosed. $62,000. My name on the borrower line, and in the bottom corner, the notary's seal. I looked at the seal for a long time. The seal has a date on it. Everyone does. It is the date the notary's commission expires, the date the state's permission runs out, after which that little stamp is worth exactly as much as a stamp from a toy store. The date on that seal had passed 7 months before the day my sister sent me to a pharmacy that had nothing in it. The stamp was expired, which meant that the woman with the canvas tote and the reading glasses had either handed her seal to somebody, or had it taken, or had sat in a kitchen. I was not in and stamped a page for a signature she never watched anybody write. Any one of those 3 things ends her, and all 3 of them mean the same thing for the loan. I sat with that folder open until 11:40 at night. Then I put on my coat, and I went down to the parking area behind the duplex, and I sat in my car, and I cried once, alone in a parked car, with the engine off, for about 6 minutes, and it was not about the money. It was about a 7-year-old boy, drawing a red line, coming out of a door. Then I stopped, and I went inside, and I did not cry again. Not once. Not through any of what comes next. That was the deal I made with myself in that car. I did not call my sister. I have not called my sister to this day. Over the next 9 weeks, I did 4 things, in order, and every one of them was a form that anybody listening to me right now could fill out. I reported the forged signatures to Fairbank Mutual's fraud unit, in writing, with the 84 forms attached, and with photocopies of 11 pages of my composition notebooks, the ones covering the months on the forms, because a care log written by hand, dated daily, over 9 years, in one continuous handwriting, is the single most boring and most devastating document a human being can produce. I gave them the notebooks that proved I did the work, and they already had the forms that proved somebody else got paid for it. They did not need me to connect those 2 things. That is the beauty of it. I did not have to argue. I did not have to be believed. I just had to hand a claims investigator 2 stacks of paper and let her put them next to each other on a desk. I reported the loan to the lender, in writing, as a forged instrument, and I signed an affidavit, a statement sworn as true under penalty of perjury, which means that if you lie in it, you go to jail. Stating that I did not sign it, was not present, I attached the pharmacy's record of my visit, which they still had, time-stamped, at 10:22 in the morning. 6 miles from that kitchen, I reported the seal to the state office that licenses notaries, which is a real office, with a mailing address, and a complaint form, and a person whose entire job is expired, stamps, and I filed a police report in person, at a counter, and it took 2 hours and 35 minutes, and a very kind, very bored officer typed while I talked. That is all. That is the entire revenge. 4 envelopes and a chair. There was no confrontation. There was no shouting. I never once told my sister what I was doing, and I want you to sit with that, because I think it is the part that would keep her up at night if she were the kind of person who lies awake. For 9 weeks, she went to work at the credit union on Dunlap Avenue. She dropped my nephew at practice. She hosted something. She had no idea. She had built the entire thing out of paper, because paper is what she trusts, and paper is patient, and paper does not care whose sister you are. The first letter arrived at her house on a Thursday, 11 months after I mailed the first envelope. I sat in a conference room on the 4th floor of an office building downtown, at a settlement conference, at 9 in the morning. Present, my sister, her attorney, 2 people from Fairbank Mutual, 1 person from the lender, a court reporter with a machine, taking down every word anybody said, and me, because I was the victim of record, and a victim has the right to be in the room. My sister had lost 11 pounds. She was wearing the blazer she wore to work. The investigation had concluded. The finding was in writing, in front of every person at that table. I am going to say it in the plainest words I have, because at this moment you should not need a law degree to feel it. They found that the forms were not signed by me. They found that the money had been taken. They found that I was the one who had done the work. Her attorney did most of the talking. He proposed. He explained. He used the phrase family misunderstanding 1 time, and the man from Fairbank Mutual did not look up from his page. And then it was my turn, and the court reporter's hands went still, waiting. I had 4 things to say. I had written them on an index card, and I had rehearsed them in my car in the parking structure for 20 minutes. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that if I let myself speak freely, I would be merciful. And I had decided, in a parked car 11 months earlier, that I was done being merciful. I read them off the card, numbered, in order. 1. For 9 years I provided daily care in that house. It is written down, by hand, dated, 13,000 times. Nobody in this room disputes that. 2. For 7 of those years, $1,400 a month was paid out for that care. $117,600. I never received any of it. Nobody in this room disputes that. 3. The signature on those forms is not mine, and the signature on that loan is not mine, and the stamp on that loan was expired 7 months before the date printed beside it. Nobody in this room disputes that either. And then I put the card down, because I did not need it for the last one. 4. I am not here to argue with my sister. I am not going to argue with her. I am here to tell her what is true in front of a court reporter. And then I am going to leave. That was it. That was the whole speech. 90 seconds. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not look at her while I read it, and I have thought about that a great deal since, and I am at peace with it. I did not look at her because she does not get to be looked at. She gets to be told. Then I reached into my bag, and I put a composition notebook on the table. Just one, the oldest one, 99 cents. Marbled cover, water-stained at the corner, my handwriting slanting away from itself, and inside it, the first entry I ever made in that house. I slid it across the table to her, and I took my hand off it. 9 years earlier, she had slid a folder to me in a kitchen, and put her palm on top of it, like a woman swearing an oath. She looked at that notebook the way you look at an animal you thought you had killed, and she said it in a conference room on the record with a court reporter typing every syllable. My sister looked at me and said, "Somebody has to be the reasonable one." I stood up. I put on my coat. I said, "You are right. Somebody did." And I left. Here is what happened after. In flat language, because I do not think this part needs any help from me. The $117,600 was ordered repaid. Not to me, to Fairbank Mutual, because it was their money that was stolen. That is how this actually works. And I want to be accurate with you, even when accurate is less satisfying. What came to me was separate and smaller, and I will get to it. She did not have $117,600. The house on Harlow Street, sold in March. The listing photograph was taken from the street, and you could see the roof. The home equity loan for $62,000 was voided as a forged instrument and reassigned to the person who actually signed it. Not to me. To her. She now owes, in her own name, with her own signature on the finding, the money she borrowed against a dead woman's house by pretending to be her sister. The notary, with the canvas tote bag, surrendered her commission. She is 68 years old, and she does not stamp anything anymore. And the credit union on Dunlap Avenue, the place where they called my sister by her first name at the grocery store, terminated her, and her registration as a mortgage loan originator was revoked by the state. She cannot originate a loan in this country again. Not one. Not ever. She was very good at that job. I want to say that because it is true, and because it is the whole point. The competence she used to steal 9 years of my life was the competence she used to feed her family. And when the state took the one, it took the other. And there is nothing I could have done to her with my hands that would have been half of that. Now, the escalation, because it always comes. She called me 11 times in the 4 days after the conference. I did not answer. She left 3 voicemails, and I have listened to all of them exactly once. And I will tell you what is in them, and I want you to notice what is not. The first one was reasonable. She wanted to talk. She said, "We should not let lawyers do this to us." The second one was information. She told me my nephew had been asked about it at school, as though that were something I had done to him from a conference room, as though the school had gotten the story from me, and not from a town where everybody banks in one place. The third one was 70 seconds long, and it was about our grandmother. She said, "Our grandmother would be ashamed of me." She said, "Our grandmother would have wanted us to handle this as a family." In 11 calls and 3 voicemails, across 6 minutes and 40 seconds of recorded speech, my sister never once said the word sorry. Not once. Not one time. I have counted. She came to my duplex on a Sunday in April and sat in her car outside. For 40 minutes, I watched her from the window with my coffee. I did not go out. At some point, she drove away, and that is the last time I have seen my sister's face. What I got, in the end, was small. There was a payment to me. It was not $117,600. It was a settlement for the fraud committed against my name and my credit, and it was enough to put a down payment on a small house with a bad kitchen and a good roof. I signed those papers myself, in blue ink, in front of a notary, who checked my license and looked at my face and watched my hand move. I have never enjoyed anything more in my life. I did not get my family back. I want to be extremely clear, because I know what you are hoping for, and I know what these stories usually give you. There was no reunion. My mother has not spoken to me in 19 months. There will not be a Christmas. Some of you are still waiting for the part where they cry and apologize, and I forgive them. And I will tell you, gently, that part is not coming. Stop waiting for it. In your own life, too. The day you stop waiting is the day you get the rest of your life back. What I got was my time, my name, and a door I can lock. And one other thing. My nephew is 11. Now, he wrote me a letter last spring, an actual letter on paper, mailed, because he is not allowed to have my number, And I am not going to pretend that is a small thing, because it is not. It is a wound, and I carry it. The letter was 4 sentences. I will read you 2 of them. He wrote, I know what happened. I am not stupid, and I am not mad at you. And then he wrote, I still have the drawing. I sat down on my front steps and read that 4 times. I did not cry. I made a deal in a car in a parking lot, and I keep my deals. But the letter is in a box now, in a closet, with 9 composition notebooks. Let me tell you what I understand now. And then I will let you go. For 9 years, that key on the red shoelace meant that anybody could find me. It meant that I was the one who was always there, always inside, always reachable. The one who could be let in, because I had never gone anywhere. That was the ordinary meaning. That is what my grandmother meant when she closed my hand around it. And she meant it with love, and she could not have known. The shoelace is still in my drawer. I never put a key back on it. And those notebooks, 99 cents each. The most boring objects in that whole house. A chore a nurse handed me on a Tuesday, and I was too tired and too obedient to ever stop. Those notebooks were the only thing in 9 years that ever kept score. Nobody read them. Nobody knew about them. My sister, who thought about paper for a living, never once opened that closet. I thought I was doing paperwork. I was writing down my own worth, in the dark, 4 times a day, for 9 years. And I did not know it, and it was there the entire time. Odette was right. The paperwork does not care who cried. It only cares who wrote it down. So this is what I want to leave you with, and it is not advice. It is the only thing I actually know. Somewhere tonight, somebody is doing the work in a back bedroom of a house they do not own, and somebody else is signing for it in a room they were not invited into. If that is you, write it down, not for revenge, not because you think you will ever need it. Write it down because it happened, and because you were there, and because a record is the one thing a family cannot vote on. Comment the word envelope if you have been paid in public and robbed in private. Comment a name if somebody wrote you down when nobody else would. A nurse, an aunt, a woman, 2 desks down at 3 in the morning. Subscribe if you have ever been told you had the flexibility. My sister said it 100 times in 9 years, in kitchens, at tables, over the phone. And I want to give it back to her now. Corrected. Somebody has to be the reasonable one. She was right. It just was never going to be her.